Salz und Licht.
Weltbeweger.
Gespräche über Gottes Wirken heute und Mission weltweit. Herzlich willkommen, liebe Missionsbegeisterten da draußen, zu einer neuen Folge von Weltbeweger, dem Podcast der Allianz-Mission. Hier sprechen wir über Gottes Wirken weltweit und Mission heute. Ich freue mich über einen internationalen Gast, den wir heute im Podcast haben, und zwar ist das Uscha Reifsnider. Uscha ist in vielen verschiedenen Rollen unterwegs, vor allem ist sie aber eine von 2 regionalen Leitern von der Lausanner Bewegung in Europa, und sie steht uns heute im Interview Rede und Antwort. Lausanne, Uscha, warm welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Uscha, Christian mission and colonization have a painful history. It's a history whose stories are sometimes still being researched until today. You yourself have done a lot on working on decolonizing mission. What have you learned so far?
I think primarily you can't think about things like decolonization without looking at your own position and who you are. So this can't be a sort of an objective approach, because colonization impacts all of us, okay, to some degree. You as a white man are part of the colonizing process, but you're also part of the decolonizing process, just because you have me here on this podcast. And I cannot get away from the fact that my parents suffered during a colonial era, also during a post-colonial era. So there's no escaping that. There's no saying, well, I'm only going to look at it from a biblical approach, because even that approach is affected by who we are and how we look at the world.
Mm-hmm. You noticed your parents experiencing colonial circumstances. You yourself converted from Hinduism to Christianity, and your father came to England from India and experienced a lot of inequality at that times. Explain to me a little bit further. To me, as you noticed, the German, white, middle-aged man, how does the legacy of colonization still manifest itself in the way Christians and even Christian mission leaders of majority and minority world encounter each other today?
Well, I think perhaps first of all is that, and I'm married to a white man, right? So I'm married to a white middle-aged man. So I've got some skin in the game, as it were. Guilt can be paralyzing. Okay, any kind of guilt, it can paralyze you. And so on the one aspect, I don't think that white people need to be paralyzed by guilt. Otherwise, the whole idea of redemption is basically not by works, not by grace, rather, it's by works. Yes, my parents suffered a lot from racism. And I certainly felt as a child that India and everything Indian, because I was born in England, was less than, and that than India, and that being white was far more valuable in society and to God, as a matter of fact, than being brown. So one of my earliest memories of feeling the limitations of being brown, of being Indian, was when I was about 10 years old, and I was at primary school in England. I might have been a little bit younger than that, might have been 8 or 9 even. And every year we had an annual nativity play, and it was the same girl that played Mary every year, and she had chicken pox, so she wasn't at school. And in the nativity play, everyone was white except for one of the 3 kings, who was the only black boy in the school.
Okay.
Anyway, so the person who played Mary, she was ill with chickenpox. And so the teacher said to me, why don't you be Mary? And I was delighted because I got to wear the blue shawl
Mm-hmm.
and I got to hold this plastic baby Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the rehearsal, I was just thrilled. I had my Joseph, the best, most handsome boy in the school, had his hand on my shoulder. I wore a blue shawl and I was carrying the baby Jesus, God.
Mm-hmm.
And I was walking slowly across the stage. And it was the highlight of my primary school career. And after the rehearsal, I went home and I said to my mom, I get to be Mary in the school play. Now, she's been to this play every year. She knows about this play every year. And she always stands at the back, because she's a foreigner and she doesn't speak English. And, she would just go stand at the back so that nobody would see her. And I told my big sister, who is 11 years older than me, and so exciting. And then we got to school to do the play, and my mum came. She came a little bit further to the front. And as we were about to go onto the stage, the blue shawl was given to a white girl with blonde hair. And I was so humiliated. And I was so embarrassed. And I remember for years thinking, I couldn't even hold a plastic white baby Jesus. How could that baby Jesus consider me? And so, don't get me wrong, the people in my school were lovely. And even at that time, that was the teacher who took me to Sunday school every week and was instrumental in bringing me to the Lord. I'm not saying she made the decision, but she was part of that decision-making process. And so the woman is still alive and she's in her 70s and she's wonderful. But the thing is, the parts of colonization and post-colonialism that impacted the way we were treated, that didn't come out of a heart of cruelty.
Okay.
It came out of a perspective and a position and a way of looking at the world.
Painful and touching what you're telling from your child experiences. So you shared before that that was in your childhood, but as remains of colonial thoughts you also experienced years later when asking where God should call you. And you experienced people telling you, well, you're from India, then go as a missionary to India. So shifting for today, where do you experience these days still these traces of colonial thoughts?
That's a good question. Yeah, people still like to try and place people and tell people what's good for them without asking them. And so part of my research was also into muted group theory and dominant voices and subordinate voices. And that helped me to understand dominant group theory. And I still find that I remember my very first interaction with Lausanne in person. I'd read articles and things like that. And I remember sitting at a table in Amsterdam for a think tank and sitting around a table and people saying, well, I speak for the Arab Christians in Europe and I speak for the Indians. And I remember saying, well, actually, I can speak for myself. I don't need you to give me a voice because I've always had a voice. And we have this expression in English, I'm giving voice. My question, continuing that sort of metaphor, giving voice, is that if you give me a voice, who gives you yours? And I think if you think about that, then you begin to understand something of your own subconscious placing in a hierarchy of Christianity. And also, while we say that Christianity is not white or English or German, the way we behave betrays what we say we believe.
Challenging, because, well, our first getting to know each other was on the Lausanne Europe conference, which because of Corona couldn't take place in place, but was performed digitally. And I was at a workshop regarding decolonizing mission, where you had one talk and a couple of other guys had other talks. And after this talk, I really felt what you pointed at earlier. I felt ashamed for being male, white, Western Europe, and so on. So on the one side, you say, okay, shame is no solution, and I'm with you, all that. On the other way, it's also not unconscious dominative behavior, like giving a voice to someone who actually has a voice already. So what steps from both sides need to be done to bring forward reconciliation, to work together face to face, and to almost through time to make this colonial past less hindering for today's missions?
That's a very good question. And I mean, the thing is that lens of colonialism, it's also based in self.
Yeah.
And so some people say, and I've heard this said, it's time for white people to shut up now and let us speak. I've also heard white people say, well, it's all under the cross, it's forgiven. Okay? And so, and they come from a desire to move on and to do things now in a better way. I think that as evangelical Christians, we recognize what happened on Good Friday in Jesus hanging on the cross. And then we leap straight to Sunday morning. And there was a time in the grave.
Yes.
And during that time, we don't know fully what Jesus was doing. But we know that it didn't, he could have just jumped off the cross and said, "Da-da, look, I'm still alive." So I think sometimes we need to spend time in the painful places of the unknown. Did the disciples really believe that he was going to rise on Sunday morning? I would say no, because they didn't all show up. Only the women went to do what was physically necessary and were surprised at his resurrection. So a lot of times we as Christians, we don't want to spend the time in the painful part of the process. And there's more in scriptures, in the whole of scriptures, there's more about suffering and lamentation and pain and sorrow. And we may not spend enough time there. So I would begin with saying to white people in these places, listen to our pain. Don't absolve yourself of guilt immediately. Take time to listen to my stories, even the things that are happening right now.
Good.
Because you have to hear them over and over and over again, because the shift is going to take a long time. And honor me enough to hold my pain with me. When an Indian person dies, and I know this in the Middle East as well, people take 6 weeks to grieve. There's something about that 6 weeks process of grieving and holding pain that I think is quite important. And I think giving people the time to process that and walking alongside without advising is an okay thing to do. It's an okay thing to do.
Yeah. I'm all with you that it's a pity to skip over the Saturday of Easter. Like that thought very, very much. I'm currently in a biblical lecture in the midst of the book of Hiob. And you get the feeling that his pain and his talks with friends will never end, because you're reading about 40 chapters about his pain. And I suppose that's precisely the point where we as Christians in this time generally are a lot of in, and specifically for this topic of seeing an unfinished world, unfinished task of reconciliation, means to listen and to grieve together. Okay. Where do you experience places where this way of listening and not skipping towards Easter Sunday, so to say, is happening?
I would say primarily it happens between the diaspora people, majority world people.
Okay.
Some years ago, I was at a conference and there were several majority world people there. And I had just come back to live in Britain after being overseas for a number of years. And a young woman said, this is typical conferences. We go to these things and we share our presentations as majority world people. But really, it's afterwards that we get to sit together and talk about what we've recently been through and the pain that we've suffered. And being in those spaces helps. But the thing is, if it remains there, it doesn't really go further than just beyond us. What we need to be able to do is to gradually bring in people that will listen and that will understand. Now, I've been married to a white man for 36 years. Over 35 of them, thank you. Over 35 of them in mission. And even for him, it took a long time for me to be able to say something to him that he would believe me without trying to fix it. You know, so this is a practice, because the thing is, it's usually when these things happen and they hurt us, it's usually leaders that everybody respects. And so for example, let's say you work for a company, we both work for a company, and your boss is your dad, right? Ooh. And your dad makes a racist remark to me. But when I come and tell you, you would say, surely it wasn't, my dad didn't do that. Or surely that's not what he meant. Wait, you're trying to explain or trying to negate my pain. Don't look for the explanation until you've heard what I've had to say. And then believe me. Otherwise, it would be the equivalent of me being in a room full of people, somebody slapping me, and the person who slaps me asking everybody else in the room, does it hurt?
Yeah.
They weren't the one who got slapped. That was me. It was me. So that's where these conversations, and they're painful for both of us.
Yeah.
Because before I could tell you, going back to the example of your dad being your boss and mine too, before I can tell you your dad did this to me, I'm already thinking, oh, I don't want to hurt this dear brother by telling, I'm already trying to take the impact of what you're going to suffer, because I don't want you to hear this. I don't want you to know this. And so it's painful. It's painful.
Okay. So we would need not to get trapped in shame, need to listen, need not to skip to Easter Sunday, so to take the time to listen and to grieve together, and to create spaces where majority and minority world Christians have time and opportunity to listen to each other, right? So you are one of two regional directors of the Lausanne movement in Europe. What I love about Lausanne Europe, and what shifted my mind is that it provides the opportunity to get in contact with Christians from totally other regional spaces, totally other cultural spaces, um, and to listen to each other. What opportunities do you see in the Lausanne movement to promote reconciliation for the coming years?
Yeah, it's a good question. When Jim Memory and I took the role as regional directors, we really wanted to break down an idea of hierarchy even between us.
Mm-hmm.
So we would say we're both regional directors.
Mm-hmm.
We're both co-directors. We share the role.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say, I don't know how translatable this illustration is, but I used to say we're both Batman. We're not Batman and Robin, because
Okay.
I can see things that he can't see, and he can see things that I can't see. We're both of a similar age. I've done a doctorate. He's served 25 years in Spain. I've served in the Middle East and North America and different places. So we both come with a lot of experience. But what we did when we first started the role is the 40 nations that are in the region of Lausanne, the way that it's been divided is Europe. We had calls with every single country, speaking to whatever evangelical Protestant Christians wanted to speak to us, and we spoke to them. And what we asked for was something that was good, what were they excited about, and something that was difficult. And we had come from this idea that Christianity in Europe is just, it's post-Christian, it's post this. Is there any hope for Europe? And we heard gems of stories. Gems. And they, Jim and I started talking. We're like, we're English speakers, both of us, born in Britain. We had no idea that in the Faroe Islands, they still begin and end each day with scripture and prayer.
So beautiful.
Right? We heard a story from a brother from Slovakia who went to Cape Town and came back from Cape Town, which was magnificent, Lausanne 3. And he had a book with him. And he was coming back and he thought to himself, yeah, what can I do here in Slovakia? I hear all these wonderful things going on all over the world. He walked into this church and he saw an elderly woman in her 80s. And he showed her the book, and it was Operation World. She said, I'll take this book and I'll translate some of it. And without even any big program, bells, whistles, fanfare, social media, they started just praying for the nations. And before they knew it, other churches became involved. And to this day, I believe it was around 30,000 people became involved. Wow. And they started different churches in Slovakia. They said, oh, there's a man from Africa. He's a Christian. He leads a church. Let's have him speak in our church. And then people from the congregation, oh, I think I'm called to mission. And they started going. And so this idea that the English-speaking world and the countries that seem to have the bigger populations and the more resources, it's false. God, the Christianity on Europe is not based on the soil. It's based on the people. And so I saw through Lausanne Europe, we had a conference. We had 160 people last week in Budapest. 37 nations. We had the Bible translated into each language. When the young boys from Slovenia came, they turned over the pages and they saw excerpts of the book of Acts. I heard them just shout with excitement, it's in our language. Yes. Lausanne Europe is not limited to English. Lausanne Europe has the potential for every tribe, tongue, and nation, for the whole church to take the whole gospel to the whole world.
Hmm.
Yeah, we have that capacity here in Europe now.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's what I'm excited about. I don't know if I answered your question or if I got carried away. You may have to
No,
do
no,
some editing.
I think you pointed out opportunities for the Lausanne movement to promote the reconciliation. It has a lot to do with people listening to each other's, respecting and giving the opportunity to experience each other in their own language, to um, and to listen to these gem God stories they have to tell. Yeah.
And I
So,
think the
mm,
colonization is not just white and non-white.
mm,
The colonization by Christianity is perhaps white and English.
mm, interesting.
And so some of these countries in Eastern Europe,
Mm,
or I could say Spanish or German as well, some of these countries in Eastern Europe, they have inadvertently perhaps bought this idea that they are less than because they're not
mm,
using German or English or Spanish.
mm. Might definitely be. Yeah. When thinking
I'm
about
hoping that
partners in the work all over Europe, there are some parts where that definitely might be uh, yeah, problematic part of partnership. That language is a problem. I'm very happy to see nowadays that artificial intelligence is making a lot of things easier, getting together, like real-time transcription, and also possibility to easily read theological and other texts from other languages. Yeah, but I'm all with you, especially for small language groups. That is an issue. Yeah.
Christianity is not geographically located.
Mm.
It's not Islam. We don't have to go to Mecca.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We
Yep.
don't have to go to Jerusalem. We don't have to go to the Holy Land to be able
Nope.
to be good Christians.
Nope. Don't
So
have
I
to
think
get
the
to
geographical,
Wittenberg. Yeah.
yeah, the geographical and linguistic
Mm.
obstacles are
Mm.
ones that we have created.
Mm-hmm.
The ones we have created.
Yeah. So one other thing we have to mention at this point is that global mission have shifted. Although there are a lot of colonial traces in the way we do theology or in the way minority and majority Christians encounter each other, fact is that actually Europe is no longer the heart or the feet of global Christian mission. So what could or should be the role of Europe in the future of missions? One thing, of course, already pointed out in this conversation is we need to listen.
Yeah. So it depends on how you look at the heart and the feet. If the heart and the feet are white, I can see it.
Mm.
But Europe has drawn people from everywhere.
The world is already here.
So the feet,
Mm.
the feet may be brown or black.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that it's God hasn't thrown the towel in. God has not given up on Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But he's changing the face of Europe.
Mm.
The face of Europe may look maybe more like mine than yours. Christianity in Europe, the feet that take the good news
Yeah.
are feet that are used to traveling.
Yeah.
There are
Migrant
feet
feet.
that come from exactly.
Yeah.
And feet that are not financed by our countries. There may be people in workplace ministries.
Yeah.
I spoke to a policeman a few weeks ago, and he was a young man that I met here in Oxford. And he was involved in an Anglo-Catholic church, and I knew him through some research, some work that we were doing some time ago when I was writing my PhD, and then I found out he's a policeman. I said, how is it to be a Christian? I said, he's come from a very sort of high church, high Anglican, liturgical. I said, how are you being a Christian in this police force? He said, people join the police force because they want to do good. Why would Christianity be an obstacle to that?
Mm.
But we've thought, as missionaries, as ministers, we think from a professional Christian perspective only. So I have to think workplace ministry, young people, student movements, migrants. The heart of Europe is in all of those. The heart and feet of the gospel in Europe is not limited to the structure of the church.
Definitely not. Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. One point that really touched me in this workshop 2021 was one of the international leaders. I guess it was a leader from Africa. I don't remember quite sure. He said the one thing that never happened was that on a level of global Christianity, the minority world never actually said sorry. Like for example the World Evangelical Alliance on such a base. So we already pointed out some steps. Don't get stuck in the shame. Listen. Take the time to grieve together. And don't behave in a dominant way. But what on a global Christian scale, what should be done regarding saying sorry?
I think saying sorry is necessary.
Mm.
I think it will release both of us.
Mm.
So, but with that sorry comes two things, maybe more than two things. But one is that you have to keep being sorry, and I have to keep forgiving you.
Yeah.
Two is that just as you have to hold my pain, I also have to hold your apology. So you may have to hear my pain over and over again, but I may also have to hear your apology over and over again.
Probably.
It's not a once and for all. It's a continuous relationship. There's, why we need mercies, new mercies every morning? Because we mess up every day. His mercies have to be new every morning because every day we mess up again.
Yes, it is actually that way.
And so I would say that, yes, as long as you don't see an apology and a sorry as that's it, we're done. Because these things are the echoes of colonialism will continue because of the world that we live in.
Yeah. So we don't need apology as a shortcut, but as a process.
Yeah. So it's no point saying I did an apology in 2021 and I'll celebrate 10 years after the apology. But from that apology requires then a day-to-day working out between us.
Good. So very good. So we're looking forward to the next year, 2024. Will be greatly for Lausanne because it will provide for thousands of Christian leaders from all over the world a once in a lifetime opportunity, the opportunity to be part of what, as far as I see it, is the most diverse and the most global meeting of Christian leaders being together for the sake of global missions. It will be the Lausanne World Congress held in Seoul, Korea. Give us a short insight. Why is Lausanne 4 necessary? What are the opportunities of this time, and how can we see? How should I say it? How can we see fruit spreading from it in the coming years?
I'd say it's important because it's an attempt to not just globally gather,
Mhm.
but to globally fellowship and relate and listen.
Mhm.
And we're listening to different voices, different ideas,
Mhm.
and still owning the fact that we can still be Christians with a diversity of thoughts and voices.
Mhm.
So I think that's one of the reasons it's important.
Mhm.
It's an incredible opportunity, probably one of the best in the world, simply in terms of what we're doing with the internet and with technology, which has now, we perhaps don't even recognize how much our capacity to engage with multiple theologies at the same time. Before all this, we had one way of looking at the scriptures. Now God has blessed us with hearing voices from all over the world
Yes.
speak into these situations.
Mhm.
And I think its importance in terms of how we go forward into the future and how we can engage with the different ideas and ideologies and learn from each other, instead of having just a single direction of learning. I think it's very important. And visibly, we as Christians need to see that we're not on the losing end.
That's good.
We're convincing ourselves that Christianity is insignificant or becoming less significant. Even those of us who believe it with our whole heart and we believe in redemption and we believe in Jesus, somehow we're buying into the bad publicity in a way that's not really good for us.
Good. Thank you for the insight. And wrapping up, I have to say a personal thank you to you, Uscha, for helping me learn to feel shame, not to get stuck in it, to start listening, and for us as Allianz-Mission here in Germany to start thinking how our saying sorry should start. And this talk, as well as the article we will publish from this talk, should be our starting point as Allianz-Mission to find our way of processing sorry, so to say. So you get the opportunity, as every guest in our podcast has, to finish up with one sentence you want to pass on to our listeners and readers.
That's a hard one.
It's always the hardest one.
It is the hardest one. And I really want to see the gospel be for every tribe, tongue, and nation, from every tribe, tongue, and nation.
Danke für Ihr Interesse und dass Sie so Teil von Gottes Mission sind. Wenn Ihnen der Podcast gefällt, dann abonnieren Sie ihn gerne oder schreiben Sie uns eine Bewertung. Damit helfen Sie, dass noch mehr in Gottes weltweites Wirken mit hineingenommen werden. Übrigens, dieser Podcast ist werbefrei und kostenlos und das bleibt er auch. Die Arbeiten der Allianz-Mission werden ermöglicht durch Spenden. Unterstützen auch Sie uns gerne mit Ihrer Spende unter allianzmission.de/spenden.